Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Wayne Shutsky, editor of the Yellow Sheet Report, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's Legislative District 4 debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate. Please note, candidates from both the Senate and House are participating in the debate tonight. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach with voters across the state, asking them for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. That survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Capital Times, Arizona Agenda, and Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you. So voters that are watching this debate live can also submit questions at any time by email at debates@kc-a.com, by text at 480-808-1814, and by phone at 480-937-1253. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or for both candidates. We will screen the questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on the candidates. This debate is scheduled for about 1 hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. For the candidates, you'll each have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. I may limit those response times for management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. The candidates we have with us tonight are Senate candidate, Democratic Senator Christine Marsh, and State House candidate, Democrat Laura Tarek. So now we'll move on to our opening statements, and we will start on the Senate side with Senator Christine Marsh.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss some of the very difficult challenges facing Arizonans today. Through more than 3 decades in the classroom, including 1 year as Arizona's Teacher of the Year, and as a mother of 2 sons and 6 foster kids, I've unfortunately seen and experienced how our state treats its children, and it's not acceptable. Our education system, for example, suffers under the weight of underfunding, among the highest class sizes in the nation, and a teacher shortage. Yet, I know we can solve these problems. My roots in small businesses and my 32 years in teaching have taught me to find sensible solutions and to work with anyone, even people who don't always want to work with me. Think of 8th grade kids who don't want to be necessarily liked by their teacher. I've got to find a way to work with them. And I also did that in my first term in the Senate when I shepherded life-saving legislation through both the House and the Senate to help prevent fentanyl from killing Arizonans as it did my own son. Yet there's still so much work to do. To name just a few, we absolutely need to fund our schools. In light of what happened this summer, we absolutely need to protect access to abortion, and we need to secure our water supply for the future generations. I'm ready to work to create an Arizona in which everyone can thrive. And I invite you all in the audience to join me in doing that. I ask for your vote in this crucial election. And again, I thank you, Clean Elections. I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. Now we'll go to you, Ms. Tarek.
Well, thank you to Arizona Clean Elections, my running mate, Senator Christine Marsh, and Wayne Shutsky. My name is Laura Tarek. I'm a former teacher, and I'm running for State House and Legislative District 4. I've experienced the direct impact of what happens when we don't adequately fund our schools. While reading to my kindergartners who were sitting on the rug in front of me, I heard a crack from the ceiling above. In that moment, I did what any educator would do, and I jumped up to shield the kids so that the ceiling collapsed over me and not my students. Thankfully, I was the only one injured, but this is the state of education in Arizona. That was the moment I knew I had to get involved. I thought to myself, okay, if you won't come to my house and take care of my students, then I'll go to the State House and change the laws. We've let divisive politics stand in the way of doing what is right. I know that it's my job to show up for all of my constituents, regardless of party or any viewpoints we might not share. It's why one of my plans is to knock on doors year-round to engage with my constituents, not just during election season. I look forward to this opportunity to engage with LD4 voters, and I hope to earn your vote by November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Since you're are both educators, I figure we'll start with education. You both mentioned funding in your opening statements. Something that's top of mind right now, I think for both of you, is the aggregate expenditure limit. For our viewers, if you don't know that term, it is a constitutional limit on how much K through 12 public schools can spend in a given year, even if the amount allotted by the legislature exceeds that. If the legislature does not override that limit in the upcoming year, schools may be shorted by over $1 billion. So the question for you both is, if elected or if reelected, what is your position on lifting that or overriding that limit? And more broadly, what type of legislation or proposals do you have to address it in the future? And we'll start with you, Ms. Terrick. Ms. Terrick.
So it's important to note with the aggregate expenditure limit that this was set in 1980. And the reality is that it just costs a lot more to educate our kids now than it did then. We're thinking about smart technology, laptops, things like that. So I join with my Democratic colleagues who have asked Governor Ducey to call a special session to address this issue. We bumped up against the aggregate expenditure limit last year, and it went right up till the 11th hour. Which put our schools in a position where they weren't sure that they were going to be able to fund the last several months of the year. And it's important to note that this is money that has already been allocated. So it's important that we raise the aggregate expenditure limit, and I absolutely believe that we need a special session to do so.
Thank you. Senator Marsh, same question.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with Ms. Terrick on all of those points. I think that it is an absolute betrayal of our students and our public schools, our teachers, our charter schools, everybody, that we haven't already taken care of it for this coming school year. It's also a betrayal of some of us who were maybe reluctant voters on the budget, but this was part of the deal, that there was going to be a special session to address this issue. Our schools have been allocated money and are trying to create plans to spend it and to not spend it, because we don't know whether it is going to be lifted or not. And as far as plans to do it, I led the way in the last session. I dropped a bill. I think it was the first bill I dropped to lift the aggregate expenditure limitation. We can do any number of things, from lifting it for 1 year or more aggressive to changing, to the rate of inflation, or changing it to the middle of the country, or just repealing it completely, in which case we'd have to go back to the voters. But it is incumbent on us as a legislature to absolutely take care of this. And it is a true betrayal that it hasn't happened already, and it's already late for our public schools who are budgeting.
Thank you. And then the budget you mentioned, the state did allocate hundreds of millions more dollars in ongoing K through 12 funding last year. So more broadly, do you believe that public education in the state is adequately funded? And if not, what additional proposals or funding would you like to see go towards schools? And Senator Marsh, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we absolutely need to invest more in our public schools. It's one of the reasons I ran for office to begin with. Quite frankly, I had a junior student come to me one day after class and ask if kids in Arizona were worth less than kids in other states. And I didn't quite know what he meant, but I asked him to elaborate, and he said that we are funded less in the nation. Our kids are funded less in the nation, and we must be worth less, or something to that effect. It's one of the reasons I ran. We are in a dire situation that is not an accident. These are intentional choices. We have among the highest class sizes in the nation. We have a teacher shortage, despite the fact that we have 60,000 certified teachers in Arizona who won't teach. So it's really a shortage of people willing to teach. We are third to last in per student funding. And we, at the very least, need to set goals in place to reduce class size and to try to move our funding up towards the national average even. This is a case where I'd actually be happy to be average.
Thank you. Same question to you, Ms. Tarek.
Yeah, and the funding that you mentioned that went into this past budget, I think it's important to note that the only reason that happened is because this was a bipartisan budget, which is not always common in the Arizona State Legislature. So that was funding that the Democrats advocated for, but as Senator Marsh said, this is nowhere near enough. I know what it's like to try and teach in a classroom with 34, 35, 36 kindergartners. There's simply so much more that we can be doing for our kids, but we need to equip teachers to be able to do that. I don't think it's good enough that we're last in the country. Arizonans deserve more, our students deserve more, and we need to elect people who will prioritize public education and giving our kids what they deserve.
Thank you. I do have a few more education questions, but I want to shift gears so that we touch on a couple of other topics first as well. Another one that was mentioned earlier in the opening statements is water. Water is obviously a crucial issue for all living things, but especially here in Arizona. So the legislature also passed that $1 billion over 3 years investment in water projects and different investments to help address water issues in the state going forward. Did you support that plan? And what additional proposals related to Arizona's water would you propose in the future? And we'll go to you, Ms. Tarek.
So I was happy to see that investment in water. We've gone far too long without investing in our water and addressing the climate change issue that we face in Arizona. So I'm happy to see that it's a start. Water is a complex issue, and we're going to need a complex approach to this. So we need people in the legislature who are going to offer solutions. And there's so much more we can be doing. Roughly 70% of the waterways in the state are not regulated. So we don't have a good idea of what's going in, what's coming in and what is going out. There's a start. We need to monitor our water so that we know where it's going, how we can allocate it in a way that ensures we have that water supply for generations to come. This is an important issue. Like I said, conservation is going to be key in this as well. This is a multifaceted issue that we will put forward multiple approaches for. Conservation is going to be a key part of that, as is water management, metering, things like that. But I was happy to see this investment. We have a long way.
Thank you. And, Senator Marsh, same question.
Yeah, I voted for and supported the $1 billion that we invested in desalination, and by the way, 200 million of that for conservation. I didn't think it was a perfect bill. As a teacher, I probably would have given it maybe a C, but it was definitely a step in the right direction and can be one tool that we have at our disposal to make sure that it is habitable here in generations to come. I mean, whether that's 20 years from now or 100 years from now, we live in a desert. We are going to be facing water scarcity issues, and we need to be paying attention to that. And we are going to need to be doing a whole lot of things. There's not going to be one magic wand. That desalination idea is, like I said, a step in the right direction, but it's not going to solve it. As Ms. Tarek mentioned, we need to get some stronger metering in, purify the aquifers that are outside the AMAs and onto a metering system and build up the metering systems within the AMAs. We could get rid of some of the buy and dry schemes that we are seeing for both the aquifers and our rivers, and conservation needs to be part of it. I don't think we're going to necessarily be able to flat out conserve our way out of it, but we can make a lot of steps. We know that the city of Phoenix, for example, they use less water in the city of Phoenix than they did 20 years. I live in Phoenix, than we did 20 years ago, despite an increase of 400,000 new residents. So conservation needs to be part of it, but I can't stress enough that this is going to take a lot of choices from a lot of directions versus trying to rely on one magic wand to solve it, because that is not going to do it.
Thank you. And then a follow-up on that, beyond water, obviously, other climate issues. Do you have any other proposals, ideas to make Arizona's energy system more resilient as we face climate change? And Senator Marsh, I'll go back to you.
Yeah, I think that we Are you talking, you're talking beyond water, just energy in general?
Energy, yeah, energy, or other facets that play into making the state more resilient as we face rising temperatures.
Yeah, I mean, where we live, it is a no-brainer that we should be the solar capital of the entire United States, and we are not. So I think we need to build that up to, we need to get that into some type of a robust situation, because it is ridiculous to me that with the amount of sunlight that we have, that solar energy is not a larger part of our overall energy plan. I think that we also ought to be fostering things like electric cars and putting in more charging stations around. We need to put them in slowly because we don't want to have so many and not the cars to actually, sustain that. But I think that there are a lot of different things that we can be doing to, make our overall energy plan a little bit more robust than it currently is.
Thank you. Ms. Terrick.
Yeah, I agree with most of what Senator Marsh said, but not all of it. We'd absolutely need to diversify our energy grid and make sure that we are powering Arizona for many years to come. And what's exciting to me about this is there's a lot of economic opportunity in this as well. When we're looking at new technologies, clean technologies, that's simply an economic opportunity for our state as we move into the future. I also think that this is an exciting opportunity, an exciting way to partner with cities and municipalities to bring this down on an individual level. Something that I've been looking at quite a bit is community solar. So for folks who may not have the ability to put solar panels on their home or may not be able to afford it, that there would be a community grid that they would be able to plug into to reduce their energy costs. Because solar is absolutely, we should be the leader in solar. There's a lot that we can do with that, both on the state level and at the individual level as well.
Thank you. All right, we got a question in from a viewer concerning short-term rentals. I know your district touches Paradise Valley. It's one of the municipalities that's very concerned about those things. What is your position on returning control of short-term rentals to local municipalities? I know the legislature took some steps to return some of those powers back this past session, but not all of those regulatory powers are back with the cities and towns. So Ms. Terrick, we'll go back to you with that question.
Yeah, so, I talk to voters every single day, and this is an issue that I hear a lot at the doors because people are very concerned. They want to keep their safe, quiet neighborhoods that they love so much. So this is absolutely a space where we can regulate more. Communities know communities best. I want to fully eliminate that preemption so that cities can set their own regulations regarding short-term rentals. There's a lot that we can do with this just in terms of managing how many short-term rentals are available in any square mile, or what some of those sound regulations might be, or something as simple as making sure that everyone has access to the owner's phone number so that if there is an issue, you could reach out. So there's a lot more that we can do, and I know that this is very important to the voters of our district to ensure that we keep our neighborhoods great.
Thank you. Senator Marsh, same question.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of what Laura Terrick has just said. I'm hearing it a lot at the doors as well. And I think we can't underestimate the effect that it is having on individual neighborhoods. I knocked on a door today and she told me that the neighbor next to her has transitioned their living room into a bedroom. It now sleeps 24 people. And the owner of that particular short-term rental owns 75 others. That is not good for individual neighborhoods. And some of the neighborhoods are really affected by it. And then we have other pockets in the valley and in our district that are not. But I 100% agree with going in and overturning the 2016 law that preempted, that the legislature put in place to preempt cities and towns. I actually find it I find it a little bit offensive, actually, that that the legislative body would assume that they know better what individual communities need to do to solve their housing shortage, which is linked so closely to the short-term rental issue. I'm by no means wanting to get rid of them, but we absolutely need to put in more regulations, more restrictions, or at the very least, just allow the cities and towns to put in regulations that work for their community.
Thank you. And I'm glad you brought up the affordable housing issue because the two issues are so intertwined. What can you do? What could either of you do if elected at the legislative level to help address the shortage of both housing in general and specifically affordable housing in Arizona? And Senator Marsh, we'll go back to you.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up now because it does all piggyback together. Like it all is a ripple effect, right? The amount of short-term rentals, it disrupts the housing stock in a very unacceptable way. And it's not the sole cause for the rising housing costs and rental costs, but it certainly is a contributing factor. So dealing with that will help a lot. We also need to invest more in the Housing Trust Fund and make sure that we are investing enough money. We had a number of bills this last session to deal with that. We ended up putting in, I think, 50,000. My caucus had asked for 100,000. Senator Alston had asked for a million annually. Senator Stahl-Hamilton had a really good bill that would create a study committee on statewide eviction prevention and housing affordability. So I think that it's time we tackle it. It's another issue that I hear a lot at the doors. The rising costs and mostly when it's renters, the rising costs of their rent in these homes. But there's a lot more we could do and we aren't doing it, and that's frustrating.
Ms. Tarek.
Yeah, I'll echo what Senator Marsh said, especially with the Housing Trust Fund. We need to ensure that is funded to a level that it helps all Arizonans. There's also programs that we can put in place that have to do with rental assistance or limits on exclusionary zoning, things like that. But this is tied very closely, especially in our district, to that issue of the short-term rentals, making sure that we have adequate housing stock available for people who make this their full-time home.
I know there was a proposal at the legislature that didn't advance regarding affordable housing, and it had, I believe there was included in that was getting rid of some of those zoning regulations or ability of cities to turn down projects if there was the affordable housing aspect to it. I'm wondering if either of you have any position on that proposal. And Ms. Tarek, I'll go back to you.
I do. I'm just a very strong believer in local control. I think communities know communities best. And if cities want to, set regulations that have to do with their housing availability, we should support that in the legislature and work with them as partners to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our communities.
Senator Marsh.
I was almost talking. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
It was the proposal at the legislature this year to address affordable housing that had to do with removing some of those zoning, I guess, roadblocks at the city level for projects that would have affordable housing involved.
Yeah, I am opposed to pretty much any preemption measures that the legislature will take to undercut the cities and the municipalities. Some of these affordable housing type units, we can incentivize them instead of making them mandatory. A number of municipalities across the nation do something like that, where if a developer includes a certain number of affordable houses, for example, they get, a break on parking, or they get a little bit of a break on the height of the building that they can build. I mean, there's lots of ways to incentivize developers to create affordable housing without necessarily making it just flat out mandatory. And I would be a big proponent of that, of exploring ways that we can do this that works with individual communities that still is going to allow and foster development.
Okay. And also tangentially related, prices are high for lots of everyday items for families right now with inflation at high levels. Typically that's focused on it as a federal issue, but what can you do as a state legislator to help ease the burden of inflation on Arizona families? Senator Marsh, we'll go back to you.
Sorry. Okay. Well, I was proud to support the earned incomes tax credit that we ran this last session. And I think we should work to expand that because it mitigates the burden of inflation on working families in Arizona. And I think that other ways to strengthen like the economy and help like mitigate the effects of inflation on our residents is through increased workforce development and job training, and maybe even in tandem with some of our unions to, really focus on building an economy that works for everybody and not for just a select few.
Thank you.
And I have actually something to add. I just think it's also worth pointing out that our current legislative majority, just fun fact, had $5 billion surplus, and instead of investing that in communities that were hardest hit by inflation, they, voted against middle class tax credits proposed this year to ease that burden, because that's what it's all about, is easing the burden.
Thank you. Ms. Terrick.
Yeah, I'll echo what Senator Marsh said. Our job at the state legislature would be to mitigate some of these effects where we can. For that, I'm very interested in child care tax credits. That would be an important step, especially for working families. Also funding full day kindergarten so that folks can send their kids to school starting at age 5, and that is a full day program. Those are two of the things that we could do that would help with those costs on our end at the state level.
Thank you. All right. Shifting gears, you mentioned, I believe you, Senator Marsh, mentioned in your opening that abortion is an issue that's on the ballot this year. Arizona has both a pre-statehood full abortion ban and the 15-week ban that passed last session. So what is your position on these laws, and what abortion-related legislation would you support next session? Ms. Terrick, we'll start with you.
So I'm not in support of either of those laws. What we've seen from the federal guidance is an extreme overreach into the decision that people make about how and when to grow their family. So at the state level, this is something that we can absolutely codify into law to ensure that everyone has the right to grow their family as they see fit, and have those decisions with, talk about those with healthcare professionals, maybe their faith leader, their family, but those are not decisions that belong on the floor of the State House. And what we're seeing now is just gone so far the other way. I mean, when I read about things like a 10-year-old rape survivor having to cross state lines to obtain the health care that she needs, that is simply not acceptable. And we know that it's going to come down to the state legislatures to hold the line on this issue. And that's something that I'm fully committed to preserving access to abortion in Arizona.
Thank you. Senator Marsh.
Yeah, thank you for such an important question right now. But I think, it's important when we're discussing the issue of abortion that we start and lead this conversation with what that human impact looks like. I knocked on the door of an oncologist recently who made it very clear to me the real impact of the Dobbs decision, and that women are going to die. I mean, we already knew it, but to hear it from a doctor, I mean, we now live in a world where ectopic pregnancies, which are 100% fatal, exist in a relatively legal gray area. And that I find completely unacceptable. So I would be working to undo the undoing, basically, of Roe v. Wade. I would be working to codify abortion rights here in Arizona. As Ms. Terrick has said also, we have very similar views on a lot of things, which is why we're running together.
Based on your experience at the legislature, do you think it'd be more effective to take the traditional legislative route, proposing a bill, or going through the initiative process to address that?
I think this is life and death enough that we need to be doing both. I would have liked to have seen a special session called about this also, quite frankly, because women, as I said already, women are going to die. It is it is not going to be just back alley abortions. Women are going to die for legitimate health concerns. And I find that to be absolutely unacceptable. And yeah, I would have liked to have seen a special session to address that, to at least expand that notion of the life of a mother to include things like the health of a mother, so that oncology patients who, when chemo is incompatible with life, are not forced to make these horrendous types of choices. So I think both need to be done immediately. But let's remember that the initiative process is very much under attack in this state. So, which is again, why I think we need to be doing both. Two-pronged approach. And if they both are successful, great. If one is successful, then we've still saved lives.
Ms. Tarek, would you like to address that?
I agree with Senator Marsh, everything she said. With the initiative process in particular, this is something that has come under great threat in Arizona. And it's one of the things that makes this state so amazing and so great, is that we do have the ability as citizens to put our own laws onto the ballot for all voters in Arizona to decide. And I think that's what's key here. Let the voters decide, because we know that a majority of Americans and a majority of Arizonans support access to abortion. And Senator Marsh and I are the only candidates in this race, in the LD4 House race, who will work to preserve that access at the state level.
Thank you. We've also received some questions about the legislative process and how residents, voters can be involved in that part. Over the course of the last few sessions, we have seen at times in committee the ability to comment on bills being severely limited. What changes would you like to see either at the legislature, or how could you use your bully pulpit to allow voters to voice their opinions on these bills before they hit the floor and go to a vote? And Ms. Tarek, we'll go back to you.
So this is actually a process I'm pretty intimately involved in. My professional work is with an organization called Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, and our entire job is helping folks make their voices heard at the legislature. So I've seen this up close and personal. I have seen instances where someone is driving hours and hours from a remote rural part of our state to testify, and they've signed into the queue and done everything as they should, and the committee chair cuts testimony that day and they don't get to speak. I've seen people be booed in committee. I've seen testimony limited from 2 minutes to 30 seconds. I've also seen it where you have 55 people signed in opposition to a bill and maybe 2 signed in support of it, and the committee chair will say, well, we'll hear 2 from each side, which is not presenting a balanced view of how folks actually feel on the issue. So at the state legislature, just a bare minimum, I support good governance and allowing citizens to come and speak and make their voices heard on these bills, whether that's ensuring that whoever has signed into the queue, is able to speak that day or offer their comments in another way using the request to speak system, meeting with constituents one-on-one, ensuring that everyone is treated with respect in those committee rooms. Those are very important steps that we can and should take at the state legislature, and I look forward to doing so as a lawmaker.
Thank you. Senator Marsh.
Yeah, I agree with what Ms. Tarek said, and I have also suffered under the weight of what she is talking about, where, before I became a senator, spent a whole lot of time waiting to testify on particular bills and being unable to do so. I think that this is a manifestation of the number of bills and the short amount of time that the legislature is trying to rush through them, instead of maybe taking a step back and not running every single bill in order to really provide the opportunity for stakeholders to weigh in. We've seen some really dire attacks on the testimony process, and we can't behave that same way. I don't plan on behaving that same way once we're in the majority. We absolutely need to allow testimony, and if that means slowing things down and not rushing through so many bills on one agenda, then that is what we need to do, because that is going to create better policy, and it's the right thing to do for citizens.
Thank you. So you no news to you, you both are running in a highly competitive district with, voters of both, lots of voters from both parties, lots of independents. So what's your message to independent voters and voters from the other party about your willingness, your ability to work across the aisle to maybe address issues that a voter who's not of your party care about, or to get things just to get things done? Senator Marsh, we'll start with you and from your experience.
Yeah, my experience with like independence at the doors is very much about finding the common ground and finding the human aspect where there's a connection. And I did that in my first session down there with the bill that I ran and passed to legalize the testing strips that will detect fentanyl in drugs. Things like, street Percocet that has fentanyl in it, which is what ended up killing my son. I've got one of the most moderate voting records down there, and I sometimes talk about that. But that is my whole career. My whole life has been about finding common ground and working with people who don't necessarily want to work with me. And I kind of made a little reference in my opening speech, but there are, like, any kid, high school kids, 8th graders, whatever, who don't necessarily want their teacher to like them. They don't necessarily want a relationship, but that's my job, is to find that common ground and reach that student anyway. And I try to take that down to the Capitol, because I think that there is a lot of room to work together. Unfortunately, it's become very divisive, but I still think that room is there, and I've lived it and will continue to live it.
Thank you. Ms. Terrick.
Yeah, the message that I would send to independents, libertarians, Green Party members, Republicans, anyone who's not of my same parties, one of the main reasons that I decided to run is because of this division that we see. It's a huge decision to decide to run for office and undertake something this enormous. But it's really, really important. We've seen in the last 4 to 6 years, this country is just in an incredibly divisive state. And I believe we can and should do better. So I will knock on anyone's door. And when I do, I say the same thing. I say, hi, my name is Laura. I'm running to be your state house representative. And I found that politics are really divisive right now. So for me, the best way to approach that is talking to neighbors about what we share, where our common values are. Of course, we're going to have ideological differences sometimes and debates, but that's really important. We need everyone's voice at the table. That's why the stakeholder process, as Senator Marsh referenced in the last question about taking more time with bills, making sure that we're hearing everyone's voices, that's really important. That's bipartisan work. That's ensuring that we're representing everyone in the community, not just folks from our own party. And I know that Senator Marsh and I are both very committed to doing that work at the state legislature.
Thank you. So you both are endorsed by Planned Parenthood Advocates of Arizona, which earlier this year had called for candidates to reject contributions from law enforcement. So I would like to know what your message is for your constituents on how this may affect your relationship with law enforcement as a legislator. Ms. Terrick, we'll go back to you.
So as part of the Planned Parenthood endorsement process, we were asked if we accept police union money. That's not something that I've solicited at this time. But I have an absolute respect for law enforcement officers. They put their lives on the line every day for us. And I also talk to voters every single day in our district who feel very safe and who want to continue to keep our safe communities and safe neighborhoods. So I support law enforcement. I am not in support of defunding the police, and that's a message that I stand very strongly behind.
Thank you. And Senator Marsh.
Yeah, I also am not in any way, shape, or form interested in defunding the police. My son is a sheriff's deputy, for goodness sake. Like, I'm not. And I saw the way the police handled my other son who deceased, his case, and how amazing that work was. And I'm proud of the relationships I've built with law enforcement in my time in office. And I understand that they are facing some of the same challenges that so many other citizens are, including teachers. I mean, of being, a shortage and, contributing, a shortage that is contributed to by low pay and all of that. So I am in support.
Thank you. Well, I have a few more education questions as I had promised I'd get back to. I know you both oppose the universal ESA expansion that passed this year and was signed by the governor. Are there any conditions under which you do support the use of ESAs, not under this full expansion, but did you support any previous iterations of the state's program? And Senator Marsh, we'll go with you first.
Yeah. I support the original 5 categories that had, I shouldn't say original, but the 5 categories that were in place before before this most recent bill went through, and very unfortunately went through. I think that if we could fund a 2-tiered system, then this might be a different situation. I mean, if we were willing to invest that kind of money into a 2-tiered system, both public and private, then all of this might not be as big a problem. But that is definitely not the commitment that we have seen at the Capitol. And from a financial funding perspective, we're setting up public schools to suffer in order to prop up another system. But I think that people talk about choice, but I think people have to remember that public schools are a choice too. And as a state, if we're going to brag about school choice, it's a little bit disingenuous to shortchange the choice that most parents make, which is for their children to attend their local public school. So let's not even pretend what we're doing here. At the same time that our public district schools, attended by roughly 85% of Arizona's children face the highest class sizes in the nation, the 3rd lowest per student funding, et cetera, statistics that I've already mentioned. At the same time that that's going on, the legislature passed a bill that siphons even more money away from that choice that families have made for their children.
Thank you. Ms. Terrick.
I agree with Senator Marsh. I support those 5 categories, but I stand with the will of the Arizona voters. Arizona voters have been very, very clear when we rejected universal expansion years ago, universal voucher expansion years ago. This is just not something that Arizonans want, and it speaks to the greater issue of the legislature simply ignoring the will of the voters again and again and again. Not only that, part of our job as lawmakers is to be responsible stewards of tax dollars, and that is not what we see here. There is little to no transparency and oversight. So it sets up a situation where this voucher money goes towards things like a ski vacation or an at-home gym or a trip to Australia. That is just simply not responsible stewardship of tax dollars. So I do not support universal voucher expansion. I urge everyone to sign the referendum petition that is being circulated right now so that the voters can make this decision. It's in the hands of the voters, and that's where it should be.
Thank you. We also saw bills at the legislature addressing what can and can't be taught in the classroom, looking at teachers and things like that. As educators, I mean, what role do you think the legislature should play in dictating what is taught in the classroom? And Ms. Terrick, we'll go back to you.
Well, so something that folks watching at home may not be aware of is that all of the state standards are available online. So if you have any questions about what's being taught in schools, that is available for anyone to look at any time. That being said, I also really, really strongly support local control. I referenced that earlier in the debate. These are decisions and conversations that are had at the school board level, at the school district level. And our job at the state legislature is to help facilitate those as much as we can, but leave it up to communities who make those decisions for themselves.
Thank you. Senator Marsh.
Yeah, I think that the legislature should have very limited control. And I think a lot of these attacks have been they've been based basically on a false narrative, and they are nothing more than a reflection of these broader constant attacks on our public schools that we in Arizona have been suffering under for a very long time. And I think what you're probably getting at is this whole CRT thing. And I got to say that the first time I ever heard that term was as a senator, not as a teacher who had already been in the classroom at that time for 30 years. It's a college level, even a graduate level curriculum that has nothing to do with K-12. With that said, though, it's such a loose and undefined term. And again, I think that's where all these attacks and where this legislative control is coming from, is this false narrative. And it's based, it's a loose and undefined term. And I don't think that even people know what they mean when they are talking about it. And if they are talking about taking away teachers' ability to accurately teach history, or acknowledge that not every teacher or every student is straight, then I have a problem with it. And I mean, a huge, significant, overwhelming problem with it. Because the fact is that in every classroom in the state, not every kid is white or straight or what have you. And while I don't think there's a place to push certain things like gender identity in our schools, we absolutely have to create an environment in which every student, no matter what ethnicity or religion or sexuality, they all have to feel safe. And I think that's what you're getting at, that all of this is tied together. And the legislature taking so much control is all based on, some of these false narratives. And it's a wedge, between parents and teachers who have quite the history of working together.
Thank you. I wanted to move on to voting issues. We've seen several attempts via lawsuits and other avenues to try and change Arizona's voting system, the mail-in voting that we've used for decades, get rid of drop boxes. What is your position on Arizona's current voting laws? Would you like to preserve all those avenues of voting that Arizonans currently have access to? Senator Marsh.
Yeah, I'd like to preserve those, especially the vote by mail, which so many of us use. I think that, I support the mail-in ballot. I think that we need to be doing whatever we can to broaden accessibility to our citizens to vote, while still keeping election integrity and safety and validity and transparency as top of the mind. But yeah, I was definitely opposed to a whole lot of the election bills that we had in this last session, because so many of them disenfranchise specific groups or large swaths of population without necessarily doing anything terribly beneficial.
Thank you. Ms. Tarek.
I agree. I want to see these methods preserved because every eligible voter in Arizona has a right to cast their ballot securely, but also easily. And with many of the bills that we've seen moving in the legislature the last 2 years, they're addressing a non-existent issue. This is all based on the lie that the 2020 election was fraudulent, which we know it was not. The election specifically in Maricopa County is one of the most scrutinized in recent memory, and there's been no demonstrable evidence of fraud. So when we're talking about restricting folks' access to mail-in ballots or vote day of, that is very concerning to me, particularly because some of these issues that we've seen really have disproportionate impacts on certain populations or certain parts of our state. For example, one of the proposals that was floated last year was to change the early voting window. So taking away those 30 days, some odd days that we have before the election to cast our ballot at a vote center, for example. If in Maricopa County, our ballots reach the county recorder in about 18 hours. But in some of the rural parts of our state, especially in our tribal communities, that turnaround is about 6 days. So anytime we're talking about shortening that early voting window, we're talking about disenfranchising voters, making it harder for people to vote. That is absolutely not something I support. We can keep our secure, safe, fair elections without restricting access, because every voter in this state has a right to cast their ballot.
Thank you. To follow up on the, do you have any voting related legislation that you would like to see proposed at the legislature next year, Ms. Tarek?
Well, I'd like to see us roll back some of the egregious bills that we've passed in the last few years. For example, same-day voter registration and automatic voter registration are very exciting opportunities. They help keep our voter rolls current, which is very important for election integrity. But it's also just a way of making sure that we're allowing everyone to vote. If folks are, working or they maybe don't think about it until the day of, they should still have their right, if this is an eligible voter, to cast a ballot. And there are many ways to do that. For example, if someone wants to register that same day, we can have them cast a provisional ballot, which sort of go into a separate pipeline. They go through additional checks. We can verify that voter the same way that we do for someone who's registering 2 months, a year before the election. But that helps make it, again, easier for folks to vote, less restrictive, without sacrificing that security.
Thank you. Senator Marsh.
So one thing I would specifically like to see happen is to loosen up our primary voting system in such a way that we are not disenfranchising our independent voters. The fact that our independent voters have to take that extra step of requesting either a Democratic or a Republican ballot has a lot to do with the fact that it's like roughly 11% of our independents vote in the primary, which is part of the reason we've got such a divisive legislature, because the hardcore supporters of either party are the ones who go out and vote, and that more moderate voice is effectively disenfranchised. And the primary election is where a lot of the state's future 2 years actually unfolds. And we need to take steps to re-enfranchise our independent voters and make it easier for them to vote. And I think that that alone would have a huge effect on the legislative body as a whole and the state as a whole. And of course, I'd also like to undo the Pebble purge, but I think I've said enough.
Thank you. All right, this will be our last question before we get to our closing statements. So last session, the legislature voted to give Maricopa County voters the opportunity to renew the Prop 400 half-cent sales tax that goes towards transportation projects. Governor Doug Ducey then vetoed that. Would you support referring that back again to the voters next session? Or do you have any other ideas on how to fund infrastructure projects in the community? So Senator Marsh, what do you?
Yes, I support trying that again. We need to invest more in our infrastructure, period, but specifically Prop 400, I would like to see resurface. It's something that the voters clearly wanted. And I'd like to just see us invest enough to keep up with the cycle of repair that all of our roads need. Every road is on somewhere around a 7 to 10 year cycle, and we are not investing enough to keep up with the deterioration that happens due to just normal wear and tear.
Thank you. Ms. Terrick.
I agree with Senator Marsh. And as a baseline, I'm always in support of referendums or initiatives or any process that puts this before the voters, since that's really what our right is as citizens in this state.
Thank you. All right, that'll take us to our closing statements. We'll go in the opposite order that we went at the beginning. So Ms. Terrick, you can start.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss the issues that we face here in Arizona. We have so much to tackle as a state. Our laws around access to abortion are outdated and dangerous. The current majority has refused to act as our gun violence epidemic gets worse. Our water crisis is growing increasingly dire. Our schools are nearly last in the nation, and the right to vote in our state has faced a series of unnecessary attacks based on a false narrative. I am the right person to tackle these challenges because I've lived their impact. I've seen our lawmaking process in action through my work with 2 nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations focused on helping people make their voices heard at the Capitol. I've also shown through the campaign I've run that I'm ready to listen to everyone and take their voices to the Capitol. Thank you very much. My name is Laura Terrick. I'm running for your State House representative, and it would be an honor to earn your vote in November.
Thank you. Senator Marsh.
I hear the train that you referenced earlier.
We're by the Capitol, yep.
Yeah, thank you, everybody who might be viewing, for joining us this evening. I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to present at least part of my vision for Arizona and for the people of LD4. I'm the only candidate in this Senate race with a plan to fund our public schools at the level our kids need to succeed. I'm the only candidate in this race who will protect access to abortion in cases of rape and incest and the health of the mother. I'm the only candidate in this race who consistently puts people over corporations. And not only do I have plans to solve these challenges we face, but I have a record of bringing people together in the state legislature to move our state forward. I've done so even serving as a member of a minority caucus, which has only a small fraction of the bills that are ever heard. But truly, it has been an honor to represent, LD 28, now LD 4 in the state Senate in my first term. And I hope very much to earn your vote for the second term in the state Senate. And again, thank you so much for having us here and for this opportunity. Very honored to be here.
Thank you both. This concludes our debate. To our candidates, we thank you very much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 8th general election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is October 11th, and early voting begins on October 12th. All registered voters can participate in the general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you.